He handed me the glass with a smile I hadn't seen in years. Wide, genuine, or at least pretending to be. The apartment on Park Avenue, which I bought after Omnicorp's stock soared, suddenly felt too small for the two of us. The tension in the air was almost palpable. "To my son, the newly crowned prince of this rotten world," my father said, raising his 12-year-old Scotch. The room was dimly lit, with only the designer lamp in the corner and the city lights pouring through the expansive windows. His voice carried a strange, almost rehearsed warmth. I accepted the glass with a half-hearted smile and a nod. We hadn't spoken in months, not really, and this sudden visit felt more like an ambush than a celebration. I watched him for a moment. Arthur Vance, a man who built and destroyed fortunes, as easily as he breathed. His fingers trembled slightly, not from age, but from anticipation. There was something calculated in his eyes. My stomach tightened. "You didn't even tell me you were coming," I remarked, trying to sound casual. The Rolex on my wrist read 10:17 p.m., a strange hour for a visit, especially from someone who barely called for my birthday. "Some things can't wait, Julian. Your success is one of them." He smiled again, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. I raised my glass, but as he turned to light a cigarette with his free hand, that same red Marlboro, I made a quick, silent switch. My glass for his. Years of corporate meetings had taught me sleight of hand in many forms. He didn't notice. Or maybe he did and let it happen. "Your grandfather loved this scotch," he commented, staring at the amber liquid. "We used to drink it together when we closed big deals." "You never told me that," I replied, keeping my glass close, untouched. He took a long sip. "I didn't drink. I kept mine near, untouched." The smell of cigarette smoke filled the air, mixing with the woody aroma of the scotch. "Proud of you," he said, his eyes meeting mine. For a moment I believed him. I wanted to believe him. But something in the way he said it, the timing, it left me uneasy. "Omnicorp is nothing compared to what you built," I continued, testing him. "I just turned an idea into reality." "Ah, but what an idea, wasn't it?" He took another sip, a larger one this time. "Revolutionizing how companies manage data, you were always too smart for your own good." The apartment was quiet. Outside, New York City pulsed as always, indifferent to the little drama unfolding on the 27th floor. A helicopter passed in the distance, its lights blinking against the dark sky. "Your mother would have been proud," he said, but his voice cracked. Slightly. "Mom, who died in that accident 7 years ago." I swallowed hard. He went to the window, looked down at the city below. "You know, Julian, I always knew you'd go far. Ever since you were a kid, taking apart those computers in the garage in Westchester." I smiled faintly, remembering that time. Before the fights, before the silence, before everything fell apart. "Let's toast again," he suggested, turning around. I noticed his forehead was starting to shine with sweat. "To the future." "To the future," I repeated without drinking. That's when the ticking started. Not from a clock, there were no wall clocks in the apartment, but something more subtle. The rhythm of his breathing changing. A slight tremor in his hands, a bead of sweat rolling down his temple. I glanced at the scotch bottle on the coffee table. Expensive, very expensive. A gift from an important client. Never opened until tonight. I had poured the glasses in front of him. But before, when I went to the kitchen for ice, he was alone with the glasses for a few seconds. "You look tired," I commented, watching him closely. "I'm fine," he answered too quickly. "Just age catching up." But it wasn't just age. Something was wrong. And for the first time that night I felt a chill of real fear. Not for myself, but for what might have happened if I hadn't switched the glasses. He staggered slightly, leaning on the Italian leather sofa. "This apartment," he murmured. "Fit for a prince indeed." "Dad," I called, my voice firmer than I felt. What did you put in the glass? His eyes met mine, a mixture of surprise and something darker. The ticking continued louder now. It was the sound of time running out. The silence between us deepened after the toast. We sat in the cold luxury of my apartment, surrounded by glass, steel, and uncomfortable memories. Outside, rain began to fall on New York, drops hitting the EWC windows like impatient fingers. My father shifted in his armchair, stood up, then sat down again. The sweat on his forehead was now impossible to ignore. Is there something wrong with the air conditioning? He asked, loosening his navy blue tie. Always impeccable, even for a surprise visit. Typical of the old Arthur. It's working perfectly, I replied, watching his every move. I discreetly took my phone out of my pocket, setting it to silent mode. I might need it soon. He tried to stand up again, but his legs didn't seem to fully obey. His hands were shaking now, not just his fingers. He looked at the empty glass in his hand as if it held some terrible secret. Did you put something in my drink? He asked, his voice barely audible. His eyes darted from the glass in his hand to mine still full. I didn't answer immediately. His breathing was ragged now, each inhale sharper than the last. I think the question is, what did you put in my drink, Dad? My voice came out calmer than I felt. He stood up suddenly, dropping the glass. It shattered on the fine hardwood floor, the little remaining liquid spreading like a confession. The noise echoed through the empty apartment, momentarily breaking the sound of the rain. I need water, he muttered, stumbling toward the open-plan kitchen. I didn't follow him. I just watched as he tripped, leaning on every available surface. He finally reached the sink, where he turned on the faucet with difficulty and drank water directly from it, like a man lost in the desert. Why? He babbled, turning to me. His face was pale now, his eyes bloodshot. He tried to take a step toward me, but his legs gave way. He fell heavily against the marble island, sliding to the floor. I remained seated. 16 minutes had passed since the toast. I counted on my Rolex. My throat was dry, not from thirst, but from disbelief. Did he really try to poison me? And now there he was, shaking violently, his eyes wide with panic and betrayal. Help, he whispered, the word almost inaudible. I stood up slowly, went to the kitchen, and picked up my phone. I dialed 911. I need an ambulance, I said calmly, when they answered. 1578 Park Avenue, apartment 2701, possible poisoning. I hung up and looked at him. The man who taught me to ride a bike in Central Park when I was 6. The same one who threw all my robotics projects in the trash when I was 12, saying that a real man follows the family business. What did you use? I asked, crouching at a safe distance. You'd better tell me so the doctors can help you. He looked at me with glazed eyes, his pupils dilated. It wasn't supposed to be like this. How was it supposed to be then? I insisted. Me dead on the floor of my own home? A mysterious overdose of the young entrepreneur of the year? A spasm ran through his body. He gasped, trying to catch his breath. The sweat now soaked his expensive shirt. Atropine, he finally murmured. Belladonna. I nodded. It made sense. Hard to detect if they didn't know what to look for. It caused multiple organ failure, a painful death, but one that could easily be mistaken for a heart attack in a man under stress. Why? I repeated the question, my voice firmer this time. He didn't answer. His eyes closed for a moment, then opened again, unfocused. I wondered if I should help him somehow before the paramedics arrived. Give him water? Induce vomiting? But I didn't. Move. You're going to lose everything, he whispered suddenly. You don't even know what you've done. I frowned. What I've done? Am I the one trying to kill someone here? The company. Your precious Omnicorp. He coughed, a dry, harsh sound. Built on sand. The intercom buzzed. The ambulance had arrived. I got up to answer it, authorizing them to come up. When I turned back to my father, he was trying to drag himself away toward the door as if he could escape. "No one will believe you," he said, his voice a little stronger now, driven by desperation. "It will look like you did this to me." Maybe. He was right. The successful son, tired of living under the shadow of his authoritarian father. A cliché as old as time. I could just not mention the switched glasses. Say he got sick after drinking. No one would question it. The doorbell rang. The paramedics. "Julian," he called as I walked to the door. "You are just like me." I paused for a second, those words hitting me like a punch to the gut. Then I kept walking, opened the door for the uniformed men. "This way," I indicated, pointing to the kitchen where my father lay. He said, "It's belladonna." The paramedics rushed to him, checking vital signs, putting on an oxygen mask. They asked me what happened. "We were drinking," I answered, not lying. He suddenly felt ill. One of them frowned. "Belladonna? Are you?" "Sure." That's what he said. They exchanged worried glances and began preparing a stretcher. As they worked, I discreetly placed my still full glass of scotch on the table. Evidence, proof that something was wrong, but also proof that I knew and didn't drink. I watched as they wheeled my father out of the apartment, a tube in his throat, monitors beeping. At the door, he opened his eyes one last time and stared at me. There was no more calculation in that gaze, just pure, primal fear, and maybe, deep down, a hint of reluctant respect. I rushed after him, not out of instinct but out of obligation. Mount Sinai Hospital was less than 10 minutes from my apartment, but it felt like an eternity. I arrived at the ER, soaked from the rain, which was now pouring down, as if New York City also wanted to wash away its sins that night. "I'm the son of the patient, Arthur Vance," I told the receptionist. "He was brought in by ambulance, possible poisoning." She typed something into the computer, nodded, and asked me to wait. I sat in one of the waiting room chairs, trying to ignore the smell of disinfectant and fear that permeated the air. Television showed some random program, muted. People whispered in corners. A child cried in the distance. 2 hours passed before a doctor appeared, a grave expression on his face. "Mr. Hayes?" he called, using my maternal surname. I always preferred to use my mother's name, especially after I founded Omnicorp. It was a small rebellion against my father's legacy. I stood up. "How is he?" "Stable for now," replied the doctor, a middle-aged man with deep circles under his eyes. Dr. Mendez, according to his badge. But I won't lie, it was a close call. Another type of poison, and I couldn't say, but atropine has a specific antidote. If he had arrived 15 minutes later. I nodded, absorbing the information. 15 minutes. The time for a coffee, song, a life to be saved or lost. Is he conscious? He's in and out. We've managed to stabilize his heart rate and blood pressure, but he's still confused. We're keeping him in intensive care for at least 48 hours. Can I see him? The doctor hesitated. 5 minutes, no more, and, Mr. Hayes, the police will want to talk to both of you. Atropine poisoning isn't exactly common. Of course it wasn't. My father always had access to the best products, legal or not. In the glory days of his pharmaceutical company, before he lost everything on bad stock market bets, he knew every chemical substance by name and effect. I followed him down bright corridors to the ICU. Arthur was connected to machines, tubes, coming out of his nose and arms. He seemed smaller somehow, as if the illness had compressed his always imposing presence. His eyes were closed, but they opened as I approached. "You," he murmured, his voice hoarse from the tube that had been removed from his throat. Too smart, always. I pulled a chair and sat by the bed, keeping a safe distance. Not out of fear, but out of caution. The man had tried to kill me hours ago. "Why, Dad?" I asked, low enough for only him to hear. What did I do to deserve this? He tried to laugh, but the sound came out as a painful croak. His lips were chapped, his eyes bloodshot. It wasn't supposed to be you. The words sent a shiver down my spine. I leaned closer, trying to understand. What do you mean by that? You were never supposed to find out, he continued, each word seeming to cost him immense effort. Those files, on your server. My heart raced. 3 days ago, our security team had identified a breach in Omnicorp's main servers. Someone had accessed confidential documents, including the source code of our new artificial intelligence system. At the time, we thought it was industrial espionage. Now, was it you who hacked our system? I asked, incredulous. He didn't answer directly, just looked away toward the window where the city lights shone against the darkness. There's no inheritance, he whispered. I took everything, all the money. You were going to find out. And you became too powerful. I recoiled slightly. My heart was pounding against my ribs. This wasn't just a family betrayal. It was something deeper. A man who would rather see his son dead than be overshadowed by him. Suddenly I saw our entire history through a new, poisoned lens. Mom's money, I murmured, the pieces falling into place. Her life insurance. You said you invested it for me, for when I was older. Gambled away, he admitted, a tear escaping from the corner of his eye. All gambled away, bets, women trying to win back what I lost. And now you tried to kill me because I would find out? He closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, there was a different glint in them. Not regret, but a kind of resigned relief, like someone finally letting go of a burden too heavy to bear. The Omnicorp system, he said, his voice a little stronger now. It found connections between your company and my offshore accounts. The money embezzled from your mother's fund, the loans I took out in your name when you were a minor. I felt a pit in my stomach. Our new AI had been designed to find patterns in financial transactions, helping companies identify fraud. We were about to launch it on the market, after years of development. How much? I asked, my voice failing. How much did you steal from me? Everything, he answered simply. Every cent your mother left. Plus, the loans? Plus what I took from your company when you were starting out. Those angel investors who suddenly backed out? That was me. I paid them to walk away. My head was spinning. The nights I slept at the office because I didn't have money for rent. The years of eating ramen to save every penny and reinvest in the company. The credit card declined in front of important clients. All because of him. And Mom? I asked, dreading the answer. Her accident. He looked away again, and that was answer enough. I felt bile rise in my throat. You're a monster, I whispered. I'm your father, he replied, as if that explained everything. Everything I did was to maintain control. You were getting too independent, too strong. A nurse appeared at the door, signaling that my time was up. I stood up, my legs shaky, my mind filled with too many revelations to process at once. Julian, my father called when I was almost at the door. They're going to investigate, the police. If you tell them, everything will come out. Your company, your reputation. I understood the veiled threat. If I reported him for the poisoning, he would reveal everything about the embezzled funds, the fraudulent loans, maybe even my mother's death. A scandal that could destroy everything I had built. Rest, Dad? I replied, feeling a strange detachment. We'll talk tomorrow. I left the room without looking back, carrying the weight of secrets I never asked to know. In the hallway, I leaned against the cold wall and closed my eyes. The rain was still falling outside, relentless, like the truths that were now flooding my mind. The rain had stopped by the time I left the hospital, but the sky remained overcast, as if hesitating to forgive the city for its sins. I drove aimlessly through the wet streets of New York, the fogged-up glass reflecting the streetlights like watercolor smudges. I couldn't go back to the apartment, not after what had happened there. I ended up at a scenic overlook in a park, a place my mother used to take me when I was little. I sat on a damp bench watching the urban landscape stretch as far as the eye could see. The clock read 3 in the morning. The city was asleep, or pretending to be. My mind raced, drawing lines between memories I had tried to forget, the punishments, the silence, the strange disappearances of funds when I started my company, my mother's mysterious accident. It was all starting to line up like a macabre puzzle. I remembered Eleanor, my mother, with her gentle smile and always busy hands, how she protected her recipe books as if they were treasures, especially the green-covered one where she wrote her most intimate thoughts. We never found that notebook after the accident. My father said it was probably lost in the fire that consumed the car. The accident happened on the highway. A rainy day like today. Brakes that fail. A car that flips and catches fire. So convenient. So clean. No one questioned it. I had just started engineering school at Columbia, against my father's wishes, who wanted to see me running his pharmaceutical business. Mom had secretly supported me, even with money for books. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A message from Julia, my partner at Omnicorp. We found out more about the breach. We need to talk urgently. I didn't reply. Not yet. I needed to organize my thoughts first. I closed my eyes, letting the memories come back. The first loan I took out to start the company. How the bank approved it without many questions. Even though I was so young and had no credit history, it made sense now. My father had probably used my name, my documents. The bank manager was his longtime friend, Mr. Clovis. At the time, I thought it was luck. Now I saw it as manipulation. And then when I got my first major clients, how they suddenly disappeared one by one. I remember Edward Mendonça, owner of the largest supermarket chain in the state, enthusiastic about our technology, making plans for a full implementation. A week later, a cold email canceling everything. At the time, I attributed it to my team's inexperience, our youth. I fired people. I redid strategies. I spent sleepless nights trying to understand where we had gone wrong. We hadn't gone wrong. It was him. Always him. The sky began to lighten, the first rays of sun cutting through the mist that hung over the city. I stood up, my muscles sore from the night on the hard bench. I walked to my car, determined to confront another part of my past. I drove to Westchester, to the house where I grew up. It still belonged to my father, though it had been empty for years. He refused to sell it even in his worst financial crises. Now I knew why. It was the last connection to Mom, to what he had done. I used the key I never had the courage to return. The house smelled of mold and neglect. Furniture covered with white sheets looked like ghosts frozen in time. I walked through the halls, my footsteps echoing on the old wooden floor. Every room held a memory. My 12th birthday dinner, when he threw the cake on the floor because I thought the taste was strange. The living room where he screamed at Mom for hours because she bought a new dress, without permission. The room where I locked myself in at 16, vowing never to speak to him again after he tore up my science projects. I stopped at his office. The door was locked, but I knew where the key was hidden. Behind the family portrait in the hallway, a photo where we all smiled as if we were happy. Ironic. The office was exactly as I remembered. Bookshelves to the ceiling. Solid oak desk. The old computer he refused to replace. I sat in the worn leather chair and turned on the computer. Surprisingly, it still worked. The password was easy. My birthday followed by Mom's. Always the same for as long as I can remember. A man of habits, my father. The files were organized with the military precision he so admired. Folders named by year, by project, by person. I found one with my name. Inside, subfolders, education, health, finances, Omnicorp. I clicked on the last one. Dozens of documents appeared. Contracts, emails, transfer receipts. He had documented everything meticulously. Every interference, every sabotage, every stolen cent. There were even reports from private investigators who followed me, recording my movements, my meetings, my vulnerabilities. One file caught my attention. Contingency Julian PDF. I opened it with trembling hands. It was a detailed plan to destroy me if I ever found out what he had done. It included everything from media manipulation with false stories about fraud at Omnicorp to fabricated evidence linking me to money laundering schemes. At the end of the document, a short paragraph. As a last resort, physical elimination should appear accidental or self-destructive. The preferred method is induction of cardiac arrest by atropine. See Appendix C for dosage and administration. A history of stress and exhaustion already established in the media through planted articles in the Times and the Post will serve as a plausible justification. My stomach churned. He hadn't just planned to kill me. He had been laying the groundwork for months. Those articles about young entrepreneurs on the verge of collapse from overwork. The casual mentions of my grueling routine in interviews. The questions about my mental health on business podcasts. I copied all the files to a flash drive I carried in my wallet. Evidence, protection, power perhaps. When I left the house, the sun was already high. I looked one last time at the yellowed facade, at the garden where I once played, unaware of the monster living under the same roof. My phone vibrated again. Julia, insisting. Now I was ready to answer. I got in the car and drove back to the hospital. The ambulance was still waiting for me. I was 15 minutes away. My father's fate now rested in my hands, in the choices I would make in the next few minutes. The irony did not escape me. I controlled his future just as he had tried to control mine. The doctors arrived faster than I expected. When I entered the hospital, the lobby was in an uproar. Nurses were running. A code blue was announced over the speakers. I stood still, watching the organized chaos of Mount Sinai in full swing. A nurse recognized me from the night before. "Your father had a cardiac arrest," she informed me bluntly. "They're trying to resuscitate him now." I nodded. Mechanically. Part of me wanted to run to the room to see what was happening. Another part, the part that had spent the early morning discovering the extent of his betrayal, remained motionless, as if rooted to the polished hospital floor. "Do you want to wait in the family room?" the nurse offered with that professional kindness of someone who has seen a lot of death. "I'll stay right here," I replied, leaning against a pillar. I took the flash drive out of my pocket and looked at it in the palm of my hand. So small to carry so much weight. 15 minutes later, Dr. Mendez appeared, still in his surgical scrubs. His face was grave, but not desolate. I recognized the expression. It wasn't death, but it wasn't victory either. "We managed to stabilize him," he said, rubbing his tired eyes. "But he suffered significant brain damage from the lack of oxygenation. It's still too early to tell the extent, but he may not be the same. Will he wake up? Probably. But as for cognitive function, movement, speech, we can't guarantee anything right now." I processed the information slowly. My father, the man who always prided himself on his sharp mind, who manipulated people like chess pieces, could wake up unable to speak, think, or move. Poetic justice, perhaps, or simply the cruelty of chance. There was something strange in his tests, the doctor continued, watching me closely. The amount of atropine in his blood increased in the last few hours, as if there had been a second dose. I felt my body go cold. "What are you suggesting, doctor?" "I'm not suggesting anything," he replied, choosing his words carefully. "But the police will want to investigate. Atropine poisoning, followed by a suspicious complication. It raises questions." "I understand," I replied, keeping my face neutral. "I will do whatever is necessary to help with the investigation." He nodded, not entirely convinced of my sincerity. "He's in the ICU. You can see him, if you want." I walked down the same corridor as the night before, each step echoing on the white tiles. The ICU was a world apart. Soft lights, constant beeps from machines, professional whispers. My father was connected to even more machines now. A ventilator moved his chest in an artificial rhythm. Monitors recorded the fragile signs of life. I approached the bed, observing the man who once seemed invincible in my child's eyes. Now, reduced to tubes and wires, as vulnerable as I never thought possible. "I could let you die," I murmured, low enough that only he could hear, if he could hear at all. No one would question it. A poisoned man, already weakened, suffering complications, it happens every day. His chest continued to rise and fall in the rhythm imposed by the machine. No sign that he heard me. "You tried to kill me," I continued. "You stole from me, you lied, maybe you killed Mom. Why? To maintain control? To not feel diminished by your own son?" A nurse passed by, checked the monitors, adjusted something, and left without a word. I was alone again with the man who was my father only by biological accident, not by merit or love. I took out my phone and opened Julia's messages. I read what she had discovered about the server breach. As we suspected, it wasn't industrial espionage. It was a targeted attack, looking for specific information. IP addresses, times, everything pointed to someone who knew our routines. Someone close. I attached the flash drive to my phone using an adapter. I sent some of the most compromising documents to Julia, with clear instructions. Keep them safe. Do not act until I command. An insurance policy, so to speak. A voice interrupted my thoughts. "Mr. Hayes?" I turned. A middle-aged man, discreet suit, formal posture. I didn't need a badge to know he was a cop. "I'm Detective Martins from the NYPD. Can we talk for a moment?" I put the phone in my pocket. "Of course." We left the ICU and he led me to a small meeting room. On the way, I noticed another man in a suit watching us. His partner, probably. "We're investigating what happened to your father," he began, after. We sat down. The hospital reported a suspected case of poisoning, followed by a possible second attempt. I kept my expression neutral. My father and I were having a drink in my apartment. He suddenly felt ill. I called an ambulance immediately. "Did you have a good relationship?" I almost laughed. "We had our ups and downs like any family." "I see." He consulted some notes. "It says here your father lost a considerable fortune in recent years, and that you, on the other hand, have built a successful company." "Omnicorp, yes." "Did he have a stake in the company?" "No, I built it on my own." The detective watched me for a long moment, as if expecting me to break under his gaze. I had faced much more intimidating investors. "Would anyone have a reason to want your father dead, Mr. Hayes?" The question hung between us. So many possible answers, so many paths to take. I could tell him everything. The thefts, the lies, the attempt to poison me. The documents on the flash drive would confirm my story. My father would be arrested if he survived. His reputation, destroyed. But what about mine? The evidence he had fabricated against me would surface. Omnicorp would face scrutiny, investigations. Years of work could crumble by association. Or I could keep quiet. Let the mystery of the poisoning remain unsolved. My father, if he survived, would be incapacitated, unable to harm me. I would keep my company, my life, and I would carry the weight of this secret forever. I looked at the detective, his patient, professional expression. He was waiting for my answer, pen ready to jot down any clue. "My father was a complicated man," I began, choosing each word carefully. "He made many enemies over the years and some dangerous friends too." "Names?" I hesitated. One name in particular came to mind. Augustus Vieira, my father's old partner, who lost everything when the pharmaceutical company went bankrupt. Rumor had it he had sworn revenge. It was a false lead, but a convincing one. Enough to divert attention while I decided what to do in the long run. You might want to talk to Augustus Vieira, I suggested. They had serious disagreements in the past. The detective wrote down the name. We will investigate all possibilities, Mr. Hayes, including, he looked me directly in the eye, the possibility of an accident or self-poisoning. Self-poisoning? Your father was in serious financial trouble. Depression wouldn't be uncommon in those circumstances. The way out he was offering was tempting. A clean explanation. No culprits, just a family tragedy. No one would need to know the dirty truth hiding beneath the surface. I just want you to find out what really happened, I replied, keeping my voice firm. He nodded, satisfied with my apparent cooperation. We exchanged a few more words, contact information. When he left, I was alone in the small room, the weight of the choice I had to make crushing me like a slow-motion avalanche. My phone vibrated again. Julia had replied. Files received. God, Julian, this is serious. What are you going to do? Good question. What was I going to do? Let him die? Turn him over to justice? Bury it all and move on? I left the room and went back to the ICU. My father remained motionless between life and death. A doctor was checking his vitals. Any change? I asked. Stable for now, he replied. The next 24 hours will be crucial. 24 hours. The time I had to decide what kind of man I wanted to be. What legacy I wanted to build on the ruins my father had left. He survived. Barely. He will never walk again, and his speech is now halting, like an old radio picking up weak signals. I visit him once a week at the rehabilitation clinic in the mountains, not for love, not for pity, but because there is still something unresolved between us like a half-open door. 6 months have passed since that night. The poisoning case was closed after an inconclusive investigation. The police followed the lead on Augustus Vieira for weeks, but without concrete evidence. They ended up accepting the theory of an accident or, as Detective Martins discreetly suggested, a suicide attempt. I let them think what they wanted. The truth remained between my father and me, and the documents I keep in a digital vault, accessible only upon my death. Omnicorp thrived. Our fraud detection technology is now the standard in the national financial market, and we've begun expanding into Europe. Julia became CEO while I took the position of chairman of the board. I prefer the shadows now, far from the spotlight my father so feared I would occupy. Good morning, Dad, I say as I enter the room, lit by the mountain morning light. The clinic is expensive, very expensive, but I can afford it. Ironic how the money he coveted so much now finances his diminished existence. He is in a wheelchair, looking out the window at the impeccable gardens. His body, once strong and imposing, now looks borrowed from a much older man. He turns his head slowly at the sound of my voice. His eyes still work, those same calculating eyes. Sometimes I wonder if his mind is also intact in there, trapped, in a body that no longer responds to his commands. And he articulates with difficulty. Each syllable is a battle. I sit in the armchair opposite him, placing the bag of grapes I brought on the side table. He always liked grapes. A strange ritual I maintain, even knowing he can barely chew them now. How are you feeling today? I ask, more out of habit than real interest. He moves his right hand, the only one that still partially obeys, in a vague gesture. Good, bad, who knows? His ability to communicate is limited to a few words and imprecise gestures. Dr. Laura said you're making progress with speech therapy, I comment, picking up a grape and peeling it methodically. It's easier to talk about banalities. We've been avoiding the real issues for months. His eyes follow me as I place the peeled grape in his mouth. He chews slowly, with difficulty. A drop of juice runs down the corner of his lips. I wipe it with a napkin, feeling a strange mixture of repulsion and duty. The company is doing well, I continue, filling the silence. We just closed a deal with the Federal Reserve. That technology you tried to steal, it's changing the country's entire financial system now. A glint in his eyes. Anger. Pride. Impossible to say. Do you know why? He asks, each word extracted with painful effort. I stare at him for a long moment. It's the first time he's tried to have a real conversation since the accident, since I chose not to let him die in that ICU. Why what? Why you tried to kill me? Why you stole from me? Why you possibly killed my mother? Or why I'm here, taking care of you after all this? He closes his eyes briefly, as if my rapid succession of questions is too much to process. When he opens them again, there is a disturbing clarity in them. Why, save me? The question that has haunted me for 6 months finally vocalized. Why didn't I let him die in that hospital? It would have been easy, just even considering his actions. No one would have ever known. I look out the window at the mountains. The air is clean here, different from the constant pollution of New York. I take a deep breath before answering. I don't know, I answer honestly. Maybe because I didn't want to become you. He nods slightly, as if the answer makes sense. Maybe it does. I regret it, he says after a long silence. Regret? What? Failing to kill me? A slow, laborious shake of the head. Right thing. I don't believe him. Not entirely. Arthur Vance was not a man of regrets, only of miscalculations. Still, something in those broken words stirs me. Perhaps the proximity of death, or a life barely distinguishable from it, has brought some clarity. I found your documents, I reveal, watching his reaction. All of them. The plan to destroy me, the records of the thefts, everything. His eyes widen slightly. He didn't expect that. The police will never know, I continue. No one will. This story dies with us. He tries to say something, but the words don't come. Frustrated, he weakly hits the arm of the chair. Rest, Dad, I say, getting up. I'll be back next week. When I'm almost at the door, his voice reaches me, surprisingly clear. She loved you so much. I stop without turning around. My mother. The ghost that hovers between us. I know. I reply, my throat suddenly tight. Me, too, he adds, so quietly I almost don't hear him. I leave without answering. In the hallway, a nurse smiles kindly, the same one as always, Mrs. Hanson, with her 50-something years and natural kindness. He's talking more today, she comments. That's a good sign. I nod, unable to explain the complexity of what talking more means in our case. Some words carry the weight of decades. In the parking lot, inside the car, I check my phone. 3. Missed calls from Julia. A message. We need to talk about the acquisition offer for the company. Life goes on. Business doesn't wait for family dramas or incomplete reckonings. I drive back to New York, descending the mountain in silence. The winding road vaguely reminds me of the path I've traveled in recent months. Unexpected curves, cliffs narrowly avoided, an uncertain destination ahead. I don't drink anymore. I don't make toasts. I don't trust anyone who smiles while handing me something. My success came at a price, and I paid it in fear. I didn't kill my father, but I didn't completely save him either. Somewhere between these extremes I found the truth. And maybe that's the most I'll ever get. The following week, when I return to the clinic, I bring more grapes. It's our ritual now, a strange communion. I peel them methodically, feed him, patiently. We talk about the weather, about the birds that visit his window. Never about the past, never about what almost happened. But sometimes, when I'm about to leave, he holds my hand with those weak fingers, and in that brief contact, There's a communication that transcends words. It's not forgiveness, not from him, not from me. It's something more complex. A mutual recognition that we are, despite everything, bound by blood and history. A reluctant acceptance that, no matter how hard we try, we never completely escape the shadows of our fathers. And maybe that's enough. Not a reconciliation, but a truce. Not love, but a distorted form of understanding. As I drive back to New York, passing that same curve on the highway where my mother lost her life, I think about what she would say about all this. About the man I've become. About the man I didn't become. I hope she would understand that I chose not to follow his path even when I had the chance. That I chose life over revenge. Not out of nobility, but out of self-preservation. In the end, maybe that's the only real victory I have over my father. I know who I am, and I am not him,